All right, so we are now doing part 1, which is actually chapter 2. The first chapter in this book, James W. Sire's The Universe Next Door, is the introduction, of course. And we went over the general concept of worldview, why it's important, how people will use different things like movies and the media and academia, books, novels, etc., to sneak in their worldview. How everybody has a worldview. We're going to be talking about worldview again. We'll do a brief refresher. And then we're going to talk about the first worldview that we're going to tackle, which is Christian theism. Hopefully, this is the worldview you are most familiar with. Although, strangely enough, growing up in northern New Jersey, I seldom, if ever, came into contact with Christian theism. I came into contact with it for a little while in an altered and well-nigh unrecognizable form for the average evangelical Protestant in Roman Catholicism. But, without much further ado, let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll start talking about worldview and the Christian theistic worldview in particular. So let's pray. God, our gracious Father, now, Lord, as we come once again to consider the things of faith and life and to address them from the point of view of your word and what it teaches us about you, I pray, Lord, that you would be with us. Help me, O Lord, to teach. I pray, O Lord, that we would develop an apologetic that is strong and robust, is able to not only take on other worldviews, but to show why they are incompatible with the universe that you've created. I do pray now, Lord, that you would help us to grow in grace, and we pray, Lord, that these things would be useful in witnessing to others, and we pray this in Jesus' holy name. Amen. All right, so we're going to go back and start with the concept of a worldview, so we're all on the same page, so to speak, in that. Tim, can you read that from there?
A world... You think I'm that old?
What
is a worldview? A worldview is a commitment, a fundamental orientation of the heart that can be expressed as a story or in a set of presuppositions, assumptions which may be true, partially true, or entirely false, that we hold consciously or subconsciously, consistently or inconsistently, about the basic constitution of reality, and that provides the foundation on which we live and move and have our being.
Okay. So, can every worldview be true?
No.
Why not?
What is this? It's going to say that if the Earth is flat, then this is that the Earth is round, and can't that be true?
So, Anna, what you're saying is that some worldviews can contradict other worldviews, and that you can't have A and not A at the same time in the same way?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Well, that's true. Would Easterners necessarily say that?
No.
People, no. A lot of Eastern mystics don't believe in the idea of contradiction or the necessity of logic and things like that, although they do act as though they do believe that. So, for instance, if I were to say to them, is it possible that 10-ton trucks are a figment of your imagination? They might say yes, until I said, well, then go ahead and step out in front of one, and prove the thesis, So they won't do it. Okay, go to the next slide, if you will. Everyone has one. Tim, can you read that? Not the other Tim. Sorry.
Okay. So, few people have anything approaching articulate philosophy, at least epitomized by the great philosophers. Even fewer, I suspect, have a carefully constructed theology. But everyone has a worldview. Whenever any of us thinks about anything, from a casual thought, where did I leave my watch, to a profound question, who am I? We are operating within such a framework. In fact, it is only the assumption of a worldview, however basic or simple, that allows us all.
Okay, so one of the things that we talked about, I'm not going to go back over it in a big way, is, believe it or not, the question, where did I leave my watch, has profound worldview implications. So, for instance, we talked about the fact that if you believe in a fantastical world in which there are elves, pixies, sprites, gnomes, and so on, one of them could have come out and stolen your watch. You could be expecting them to return it tomorrow with massive improvements made to its internal working or something like that. But there are certain worldviews, or it could have sunk through the desk and entered into another dimension in some worldviews or so on. Or the other question is, did your watch really only exist in your memory? Was it a false memory that was implanted and you never actually had that watch? Yes, Owen. Yes, my watch, that's true. Where is the watch that I share with the rest of the commune? Yeah, no, that could be the case, that's true. But everybody has one of these worldviews. They are, in essence, go to the next slide. As we said before, the glasses through which we view the world. Everybody is wearing them. Nobody is simply digesting input, data from their senses and so on without running it through some sort of process. Even animals, we might say, have their own presuppositions. For instance, the squirrels in my yard presuppose that our dogs have a hostile intent towards them and react accordingly whenever the door opens. They are correct in their worldview, incidentally. My dogs are incredibly hostile towards them. But these are the glasses through which we view things, and they can alter our perception of reality in ways that cause it not to be real. So, for instance, worldview is the answer to why do some people think men get pregnant? Because their worldview predisposes them to think that that is a possibility. So ours does not, and so we end up conflicting on issues like that. But let's talk about our worldview, or hopefully our worldview. I hope it is. GLOA?
I think that comes from, well, I mean, there's an interchangeability, and you can, it's making the nature of the thing, getting it incorrect, that you cannot interchange one for the other. So it gets the nature of person incorrect entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly.
Right.
The exact same reason that they're mutually exclusive, that they're not.
All right. And one worldview inevitably will be forced to bow to the other. You can't have conflicting worldviews in society without there being a power struggle going on. Worldview one that we'll be looking at is obviously it's Christian theism. For centuries, Christian theism was the dominant worldview in the Western world prior to the end of the 17th century when deism began to spread. Really, it was the Enlightenment that opened the floodgates for all sorts of non-Christian thinking. And then gradually, as we came into contact with other worldviews in the East, Confucian worldview, for instance, and then the Hindu worldview, and also began to generate new worldviews of our own that were usually parasitical from Christianity, as deism is very parasitical. But we gradually got more and more worldviews working in Western society. And the dominance of the Christian theistic worldview has begun to be reduced. Prior to the spread of Christianity in Europe, of course, was there a worldview?
Yes.
Yeah. What was that worldview, broadly speaking?
A lot of it was polytheism.
Yes, it was polytheism, and we would call their religions paganism. Okay, and there was the Roman Hellenistic worldview, which is essentially a Greco-Roman worldview, different pantheons, different gods. Very similar beliefs, because the Romans basically filched everything, including the worldview of the Greeks, pulled that away. Who knows what Romans thought they were descended from? No. Well, Romulus and Remus were the founders of Rome, yes, but the Carthaginians, and specifically the Trojans. The Trojans. It wasn't actually it could have been the Carthaginians had what's his name hung out with Dido for much longer, but they felt that they were the survivors of ancient Troy. This is a myth that was enshrined by Livy in what great work? Does anybody know? The Aeneid is right. It's the story of Aeneas. Very good. It's like you were classically trained or something. Everybody. There you go. Okay. So in any event, there was this pagan worldview that was throughout Britain. You had the Greco-Roman worldview that the Romans kind of brought with them wherever they went. And they found earlier worldviews. So for instance, amongst the Celts, and the Britons, there was another form of paganism, Druidism. It was much more pantheistic than the Greek worldview, a lot less, they would say, civilized, because they used to do things like, for instance, what would they do with captured Roman soldiers? Do you know how they sacrificed them? They would put them in a wicker basket and burn them to death. So the Romans were not having any of that religion. They were fine with any of the civilized religion. Obviously, they were pluralistic. And as long as you worshipped Caesar when you were told to burn the pinch of incense and acknowledge his lordship, Caesar's lord, then you were okay. You could worship Mithra or Athena. There were some areas where they did not like you bringing kind of novel. So, for instance, from time to time, Mithra worship was discouraged amongst the Roman army because it became very, very popular there. Until Christianity came on the scene, and the Romans really were having none of that, because the central declaration, 3 words in Christianity, is Jesus is Lord. And if Jesus is Lord, who isn't Lord, really, in the meta-narrative sense? And who isn't a god? Caesar. All right. So let's go to, there's a question here. What were some of the differences you can think of? Well, we've kind of gone over them. Let's go to the next. Let's go to the next. Obviously, within theism, there are many family squabbles, is the way Sire puts it. One of the biggest, obviously, when we're talking about why things happen, why people are saved, what would be one of the biggest family squabbles right there? Right, Arminianism, right. We don't want to talk about Armenianism because that would be getting us in trouble with the Armenians, and they're just people from Armenia. But Arminians are people, obviously, who deny the absolute sovereignty of God in salvation. They would say that men and God cooperate in the work of salvation. Therefore, it's a synergistic work, not a monergistic work. That's right. But that Sire says, for the purpose of our inquiries, this is an interfamily dispute. So that, for instance, he would see Roman Catholicism and Protestantism as essentially they're both Christian theistic organizations or worldviews. They're not materialists. They don't believe that everything is, a matter of matter, so to put it that way. They didn't hold that ultimate reality was meaningless and impersonal, or that God was impersonal or unknowable. God is knowable. And while God is in one sense transcendent, he is also immanent. What does that mean, incidentally? Yes, Joy?
He's outside the box.
Okay.
So,
yeah, if we think of the universe as a box with all the stuff in it.
He's outside of our reality, but he is also present within our reality.
Right. Okay, so he's not closed, the box is not closed off and he doesn't interfere with it. Incidentally, did you guys get a copy of The Universe Next Door? You do, you have one. Do you have one of your own, your very personal one? Because we now have enough for that. Could you get Emily a copy of The Universe Next Door? Thank you so much. All right, the world, let's go to the next one. Oh, sorry, I'm asking him to do 2 things at the same time. I want you to be ubiquitous. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so the next one should be Baby John's world. No, Baby John. I need Baby John.
That's number 2. I thought I saw something.
Go back 1 from there. It's lagging. Man, I'm not going to use that PC for gaming. Then again, I'm not going to use any PC for gaming these days. Why can we not go back? No, that's forward.
Baby John's world.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we made it to Baby John's world. Baby John is a young man, or is a baby, who is born into the Christian theistic world. Baby John, a child of the 17th century, was cradled in a cultural consensus that gave a sense of place. The world around was really there, created to be there by God. As God's vice-regent, young John sensed that he and other human beings had been given dominion over the world. And the Bible says that explicitly, doesn't it? Where does it tell us we were given dominion over the world? We're told that in the creation, what do we call that? The dominion mandate in Genesis 1:28, and then it's reiterated again after a cataclysm. Anybody know? Noah, after once again he's told to go out and subdue the world in Genesis chapter 9. So 2 places in Genesis and then throughout the Bible, man's dominion over the earth is assumed. Okay, he is the highest of God's creations, the most important one because it's the only creation in which, the only part of his creation that was in his image, created upright in knowledge, righteousness, and so on. So let's talk about Baby John's ethics. Ethics comes from what word? Ethos. And what is that? Literally, what's good? What is good? The idea of good and evil. All right. Let's see. Charlie, would you mind reading about Baby John's ethics for us?
He was required to worship God. God was eminently worthy of worship. He was required to obey God, but then obedience to God was true freedom, since that was what people were made for. Besides, God's yoke was easy and his burden light. Furthermore, God's rules were seen as primarily moral, and people were free to be creative over the external universe, free to learn its secrets, free to shape and fashion it as God's stewards, cultivating God's garden and offering up their work as true worship.
Okay, so Baby John, regardless of whether or not he really believed, was really united to Christ by faith, we might say born again. Regardless of that, he was raised in a worldview that was utterly suffused with Christian ideas, suppositions, morals. He lived in a world that was orderly, purposeful. When he went to bed at night, he expected that everything would continue on, not simply because of mechanics. He believed that the Lord was governing the universe, and therefore the sun would rise in the morning because the Lord commanded it to. Not, in a pagan kind of sense, like Saturn, driving the chariot across the sky, or was it Jupiter? Apollo. That's right. Okay. Well, yeah, but Apollo. What was there was. In any event, so but the idea was, it wasn't that God was driving the sun across the sky, but nonetheless the sun would rise. So his life had meaning, it had morality, and he had identity in the universe, and not just identity in the universe, but identity that came from God. In other words, he was created in the image of God, and therefore he had eternal what? Worth. He had eternal worth. All right, so we'll go to the next one. Today, however, things have changed. We talked about what these symbols meant, the various worldviews. The West is filled with non-theistic worldviews. Some even dominate academia and government. Tell me which ones are dominating in terms of academia, higher academia especially. Marxism, yeah. It is very difficult to find a university that has not absolutely embraced the oppressor dialectic and teaches according to it, especially in areas like English and in history. So, for instance, it is very likely, although they're finding that increasingly college students and books don't come into contact with each other. Okay, so there's a lack of reading going on. Other than screen reading, and that cherry picking and so on, or reading summaries and things like that. ChatGPT, please tell me what the Brothers Karamazov is about. Incidentally, that is not the same as reading the Brothers Karamazov in any sense. But, and it's a lot, and really institutions are, many of them are okay with that because they want an outcome. They don't want to process, so they don't want to create people who can think and reason. They want people to have, in many cases, just simply opinions about things that have been shaped and molded by their academy. And then when they become rich and powerful, they want them to buy a building and put their name on it someplace on the campus. So So we have, obviously, we've got Marxism, we have Islam there, we have atheism, we have Buddhism, and we have over here the New Age and so on. All of them have been suffusing kind of their tentacles into the Western worldview, and in many cases in ways that we did not, or we don't often absorb. So for instance, we were talking about an incredibly important series culturally for the United States, series of movies that came out in the 1970s, created by a fellow by the name of George Lucas. What was this franchise? Star Wars, very good. So it started out, okay, as a means of teaching New Age and Buddhist concepts, okay? A way of getting this, the whole idea of the Force is very Eastern, not very Western, obviously. But interestingly enough, it started out as a way of, communicating those views, and then later on, its entire worldview came to be denominated by another force. What was that? It's up there as well. Marxism, okay? Catherine Kennedy and Marxism destroyed the cultural Marxism of the Disney Corp, destroyed the story. But moving on, all that to say, we have all of these different ideas and worldviews now permeating. Yes, Joy?
I'm sorry.
No, you go on. I have acknowledged you. Yeah.
I think that even within academia, you end up having rival worldviews between Marxism and atheism and the hard sciences.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it really does depend upon whether you're from the traditional humanities or from the
Liberal arts,
sciences. Yeah,
social science side
Right.
versus the hard science.
To a great extent, however, there are certain non-negotiables in most of American public academia. One of them is cultural Marxism. You just can't, you have to accept intersectionality. You have to accept the oppressor dialectic. You have to accept a colonizer worldview regarding America. Those are things that you can't, no matter what. The bizarre thing is, you can be in the hard sciences and still have to accept that kind of worldview. Also, all of them, if you're not a materialist, okay, so you can be a non-materialist, and a materialist believes that there is no what? There's no spiritual or supernatural. Everything is matter. Okay, that's it. Energy and matter, that's all we got. You can be that, but you cannot allow it to affect your thinking in any way. So if you're seeking to come to a conclusion about where the world came from, where the universe came from, where people came from, you have to do it from an exclusively materialistic viewpoint the moment that you begin to bring in the supernatural. In fact, that'll even, I'll give you a very, to me it was hilarious. I've forgotten her name again. I keep forgetting it. She was the daughter of a famous Israeli archaeologist, and she wanted to find King David's palace. The primary means that she used in doing this was simply following the descriptions in 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and reading the Bible, okay, as history. She dug where the Bible said the palace would be located, and lo and behold, what did she find? The palace. She found David's palace. They cried, the entire archaeological world cried foul. They're like, you can't do that. You cannot treat the Bible as though it's a historical work, okay? It has to be supernatural, stuff that we view with a hermeneutic of suspicion. If we were to begin to take our instructions from the Bible on where to dig in Israel, what would happen? Well, we'd start finding things, but moving on. So they were appalled that she had left behind all of her materialistic and atheistic presumptions and found it that way. Let's talk about the person. We talked about baby John, who was raised with that Christian theistic worldview. Now we're going to talk about baby Jane, who's a child of the 21st century. Jesse, you want to read that one for me? And that's one of the things that we're seeing, obviously. There's one of the biggest clashes that's going on at this point in time is between parents and academics, parents and school teachers, in essence. over the issue of what worldview is going to be taught to my children. Is it going to be the culturally Marxist worldview, which is strictly materialist, heavily intersectional, very influenced by the LGBTQIA worldview? Or is it going to be the kind of synthetic Christian worldview that I've inherited and we want our children to take, to continue on with? And the Supreme Court is now actually hashing that out in a case that's come before them, asking exactly that question. Does the school system have the right to force my children to sit through an education in LGBTQIA worldview? And the parents are saying no, and obviously the school system is saying yes. And from their point of view, they are more qualified than parents to teach children. That's another thing that's come up. We're dealing with the technocratic, you're not qualified to teach a child thing when we're talking about parents, because you haven't been to an institution that taught you how to raise kids. But anyway, this is baby Jane. She's being raised up in an entirely different kind of system. Let's talk a little more about it. All right, so we remember the 8 basic questions. What is prime reality? What is meant by prime reality? Somebody define that for me. Prime reality. You can even look it up in the book if you want to. I'll give you credit for that. Yes? The reality of the what? Yeah, well, yes, it is. Where it is, it's answering in essence the question, where did everything come from? Why does it exist? How is it knowable? What's the nature of the universe, and so on. So for Christianity, we'll learn obviously that prime reality is God. Okay, he's the first cause of everything. Without him, there is nothing. So, but anyway, those are the basic questions. What is the nature of external reality, the world around us? Is it really there? There are some worldviews that posit that it's not really there. Okay, that reality is an illusion, or that reality is bad, or what we would call reality. The material universe is bad and something that we need to transcend, to get away from. What is a human being? For Christian theists, obviously that's a question that once again goes back to our prime reality. It goes back to God. But for the materialists, does it go back to God? No. For the materialists, we are an amazing series of accidents. And what happens to those amazing series of accidents at death? Bloop, 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 bloop. Yeah, that's it. You're done. It's over. You were essentially a wet machine, and then that's like when you power down your computer at night. That is exactly what happens. You stop functioning. You're done. Why is it possible to know anything? How can we know things for certain? Okay, for the Christian theists, we have ways of knowing that the Eastern mystic would deny. How do we know what's right and wrong? Where does our morals come from? Interestingly enough, you will find as we go through the various systems that there is a tremendous amount of cognitive dissonance in these various systems, okay? The materialist ones have no means of determining really what's good and what's evil, okay? The ones that are hyper-materialistic, that believe that everything has to be derived empirically. Let me ask you a question. What's the experiment in the lab that allows you to derive good? There is none, okay? It doesn't, so where do you get good and evil? Well, you borrow them, or you create them out of whole cloth at this point in time. And you call that which was once called evil good, and that which was once called good evil, and transpose them. So what is the meaning of human history? For the radical materialist, okay, ultimately, where does human history go? The what? Yeah, what's going to happen? The inevitable heat death of the universe. Human history ends. That's ultimately it. So materialists like Elon Musk, we've got to get to other planets so that when our sun dies, we'll be inhabiting other planets around another sun that's got more time on the clock, and so on. But eventually, entropy says, what happens to the universe? Eventually, it dies. If there's no God, then... And the smarter, and this is something we'll get into as we get into the materialistic worldviews, the smarter philosophers have realized that if there is no God and there is no purpose to human existence, life is meaningless. Life is absurd. Okay, it's a big joke. You know, why are you working? I need money. Why do you need money? So I can buy food. Why do you need food? So I can stay alive. But you die. That's true. You know, for a little while longer. Why should you want to stay alive a little while longer? So I can read philosophy books? Good answer. There you go. That, you know, but then there's the what personal life-orienting core commitments are consistent with this worldview. Now, this is interesting because there are certain things that you have to be committed to hold to various worldviews. And then there are inconsistencies that will crop up. Okay, you may believe cognitive dissonance is one of the main problems or bugbears in any worldview. Obviously, we will often find people, Christians, who say they hold to something, but then in actual application, they don't live it out, right? I mean, give me an example of that.
Are you saying that the worldview itself does not have cognitive dissonance?
Some worldviews actually do have cognitive dissonance built in, okay? But in Christianity, there's often a cognitive dissonance in that we don't live according to our worldview.
The coexist crew.
The what?
Coexist crew.
Okay, I guess. That'd be one. Yes, Sam? Right. Yeah, there's a lot of that. And basically, there's a cognitive dissonance that goes on in all forms of hypocrisy within the Christian worldview. Yes?
Would that be the same thing as, nominal Christians?
Yeah, nominal Christians will often, but the more nominal a Christian becomes, the less likely they are to really understand the Christian worldview at all. So, but there are Christians who would say, I'm opposed to this, and yet they do it. You know, I'm opposed to this except at home. Anyway, moving on to the next. What is prime reality? Well, we answer that question this way. Bobby, you want to read the what is prime reality there?
Prime reality is the infinite personal God revealed in the Holy Scriptures. This God is triune, transcendent, and immanent, omniscient, sovereign, and good.
Okay, so there are certain qualities that the Bible tells us that he's sovereign, nothing is beyond his rule, not even one molecule. There is not, I wish I could do Sproul as there is not one molecule in this universe that he does not say, this is mine. Okay, so God is good. It would be a problem, wouldn't it, if God was sovereign but not good? Why is that?
Because God gets smart.
Yes, he would be all-powerful, and then we would have the problem of the Greek gods, wouldn't we? Who one moment they like you, the next moment they're destroying your culture entirely, for entirely arbitrary reasons. He is infinite, all right, so is there any limiting God? What about the vastness of the universe? Surely he fits in that. Nope. Okay, he is personal. What does that mean? Okay, it's not just that he's, like you say, I have a personal relationship. Okay, he's a person, all right? So you can actually, he's not a force. He's not, he's not like a rock or something that occupies space but isn't rational. He has personality as well. And you can know him, yes, and that would be, you can have that personal relationship. He also is transcendent. All right, which means...
Does that mean that he condescends to us?
Well, in order to have anything to do with us, yes, he would have to stoop, but he transcends his creation. Yes. Yes, nothing constrains God. The universe doesn't constrain God. Time doesn't constrain God. He transcends all things. Okay, he is. He is also omniscient, meaning he knows everything. He is sovereign. He is good, and so on. That is prime reality for us. So Westminster Confession of Faith, chapter 2, section 1, puts it very well. Let's go to the next slide. There. Joy, could you read that for us?
Yeah. There is but one only, living and true God, who is infinite in being and perfection, a most pure spirit, invisible, without body, parts, or passions, immutable, immense, eternal, incomprehensible, almighty, most wise, most holy, most free, most absolute, working all things according to the counsel of his own immutable and most righteous will, for his own glory, most loving, gracious, merciful, long-suffering, abundant in goodness and truth, forgiving iniquity, transgression and sin, the rewarder of them that diligently seek him, and withal most just and terrible in his judgments, hating all sin, and who will by no means clear the guilty.
Okay, so we could spend literally the rest of our lives unpacking each one of those attributes that we have done, but I'm not going to. Does anybody have any questions that are? Is there any language there that is really confusing to you? Yes.
Terrible in his judgments.
Yes, creating terror. In other words, okay, there's a bunch of different words that have been completely transformed since the 17th century when the Westminster Confession was written. One of them is awful, okay? Inspiring awe in someone, not, oh, that's terrible, and the other is terrible, okay? Terrible is to inspire fear and yes, literally. Okay, that's the worst. It's not like these are the worst judgments. It's rather these are the most fearful and you want to avoid them judgments. Most terrible.
Today's terrifying rather than terrible.
In one sense, yeah. So, awesome now means what we used to mean by awful. So, you were full of awe. Yes, Tim.
Just a couple of words there, because there's been a big controversy in the last few years with parts.
Oh, yeah, parts and passions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also passions, which has been around for longer, because that's another word that has changed in meaning since the 17th century. And you'll have people that will say, well, I believe God is a loving God, therefore I deny what Westminster says here, but that's not what
Right.
it means. He's not ruled by his passions.
Right. The issue there is God isn't a reactive God. Okay? God doesn't react to you. Why does God love us? Deuteronomy tells us God loves us because he loves us. Okay? His love is original to him. It's not a response. Okay? So all of these, we don't add anything to God. We don't mutate God. He's not mutable. And so does he love? Absolutely, he loves, but his love is original, not reactive, and it's not a change has occurred in God. In fact, God goes overboard to tell us, the reason why I don't consume you, destroy you, and wipe you away utterly, because I don't change. Okay, so if I loved you in the beginning, I'm going to continue to love you. That's the wonderful thing about God. So, all right, let's go to the next, just for the sake of time. Second question, what is the nature of external reality, the world around us? Who has not read? Tony, did you read yet? Oh, wait, you actually asked for mercy and pity because of your dental work. I am sorry, but Elisa, you didn't have dental work, right?
No.
Okay, can I ask you to read that then?
What is the nature of external reality, the world around us? External reality is the cosmos God created ex nihilo.
Nihilo. Out of nothing, literally.
To operate with the uniformity of cause and effect in an open system. External reality is the universe that God created out of nothing at his command. The universe functions in a uniform, consistent way. God can enter into the universe and interact with his creation.
Okay, this doesn't seem important, but it is incredibly important, okay? First off, Everything that we see was spoken into existence, everything seen and unseen. That would include the angels, for instance. All of it was spoken into existence by God. All right? He did not create it out of eternal, pre-existing matter. All right? He spoke, and the things came into being in the order in which he spoke them. And not only did he create these things, but he ordered them, he governs them. So the rules of the universe, which are so finely balanced that if you move the dial in any direction, you destroy the consistency of the universe. He created those laws. But is he held by those laws? No. So normally when I step out onto a swimming pool, what happens? I go sploosh, okay, because the surface tension is not sufficient to support my enormous bulk. So I break through the surface, okay? However, is God constrained by that? No. So he can determine that the surface tension will support his footsteps and walk out, okay? He is the God who is able to transcend the rules of his galaxy, okay? Normally, if I have a little basket of loaves and fish, I can feed 2 or 3 people. As I break them, they don't multiply, all right? That isn't the case with Christ. So the miraculous, what we call the miraculous, is natural to God because it's him transcending the rules that he's built into his own universe. Iron, does it normally float? No, but when the Lord instructs, when Elijah calls upon the Lord to cause the iron axe head to float, it floats. All right? This is a transcending of those normal laws. Sometimes there's a reversal of the processes that have already taken place. Things like, for instance, the words Talitha Kumi, what does that mean? Little girl, I say to you, arise. And the synagogue ruler's little girl had her life restored to her, given back. She was not, now there's an important, I know this is gratuitous in one sense, but do not say she was resurrected. That hasn't happened yet. Okay, that is a day that's coming for her. All right, she was revived, given her life back at that point in time. So God can enter into the universe. He can interact with it however he wishes. And yes, Liz.
Why was she not resurrected?
Because she was not given her resurrection body. It has not been conformed to the image of Christ yet. She was given life back. So revived, revivified. But she would also, once she was given her life back, she began the normal curve towards death. When you are resurrected, you have eternal life. And death, its power is broken over you forever. So that young girl, when she is resurrected, okay, she will have a body that will never suffer from the consequences of sin and the fall ever again, or breakdown. Jesus was resurrected. He's the first fruits, and then we follow in his train. We look forward to our resurrection. Okay, so, you okay, Margaret?
Oh, I was just thinking, he still, when he was resurrected, does that mean the flesh that he had after was pure at that point? There was no sin in it?
He was never afflicted by sin. The only time that he and sin interacted is when he became the sin bearer. For us. So, all right, let's go to the next. I'm going down a rabbit trail now. What is a human being? Caleb, can you read that one for us?
Human beings are created in the image of God and thus possess personality, self-transcendence, intelligence, morality, gregariousness, and creativity.
Some possess gregariousness, but some not so much. What is it to be gregarious? To be a person who likes socializing, they like people named Greg. I'm kidding. But yeah. What about the rest? Because we are. Did you read that as well?
No, you didn't.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Caleb. Read that.
We are made in the image of God. We possess certain attributes of God, such as intelligence, will, the ability to create, and the ability to make moral decisions. This is the reason why human beings have inherent worth and dignity. It is why we have rights.
Now, that paragraph by itself is also incredibly important, okay? There's no other creature on this planet like mankind. Because when God made the creatures, he made the creatures. and he gave them life, but he did not give them an immortal soul. And he did not create zebras in his image. They are amazingly nifty creatures, tons of things that he made. But only into man did he give a nephesh, a spirit. Only into him did he give them that eternal soul, a spark that would go on forever. All humans are eternal. The question is, where will they spend eternity? And that should be the thing that we are most concerned with, but unfortunately we're not. We have qualities like unto God. Man is the only truly reasoning creature on the entire planet. We are the only ones capable of not only sentience, that is, knowing ourselves, but also knowing God. Gorillas are cool, but they can't know God. Okay, so we can talk. We can teach them basic things, how to tell us they want the banana and things like that. But there is a transcendent reasoning that animals are not capable of. Yes, Joy.
I can't remember. I seem to recall I think it was R.C. Sproul talking about the barking of the dog. It should be a testimony against us because all nature does as it's commanded, because nature does not have the free will, and us and our free will condemned ourselves to sin by our sin nature. But in some senses, my question is, do you agree with respect to, even though sin has entered the world and affects all things, does the non-human creatures obey God better in some senses than we do?
The angels, the unfallen angels, have always and will always obey God perfectly, and so on. And yet they're not at the top of the creation slide. In one sense, it's wonderful. God, all nature sings thy glory is a truism. The heavens declare the glory of God. The psalmist makes that point. So yes, they do glorify his name in their own way and in doing what they were created for. But sin affects the animals as well. This is where I'm beginning to, like a rabid dog or, pit bulls by their very nature. They're, sorry, let's move on. Sorry, I should not have thrown the hand grenade into the congregation like that. That's was bad of me. But there is a sense in which the fall of mankind broke nature as well. Tornadoes, hurricanes.
They're all in the scope of this will, in that sense. They're ordained. They're ordained.
Yes, but is a rabid dog in some sense still evil? Yes, because it's a consequence of evil, and yes, because of the sadness that when they attack a child or something like that. That's so yes, okay. There's one sense in which, and this is where we get into the mystery of predestination and so on. There's one sense in which everyone is obeying God. In one sense. In fact, Peter, when he gives his Acts chapter 2 speech, he says, you took the Lord of glory, the promised one, with your own sinful hands and handed him over to the Romans in accordance with his direction. Okay? That was what God had ordained. All right? That specifically he'd ordained that would be. And had it not happened, had their sin not occurred, salvation couldn't have occurred. So all of the universe, and one day we'll look back and we'll see the glorious way that all of these parts worked together to glorify God. And we'll be amazed. I think we'll always be amazed. But so we're getting into questions of, yeah. Okay, so, all right. So let's talk about the rest of the Christian story. Next. Sorry. All right. So here, basically, we have the way we conceive of the universe, how things are unfolding, right, as Christian theists. Where did everything come from? Creation. Why is everything so messed up, and why are people mean? The fall. What's the answer to the problem of the universe and the fact that I'm going to drop dead at some point? Redemption. And what are we looking forward to? Restoration, the new heavens and the new earth. Okay, so that's the full line from beginning to where we're going, and then on into eternity, okay? Living in the restored heavens and earth. That is our meta-narrative, okay? Overarching everything. There's an explanation for everything that has happened, has existed, will exist in that. Does everybody believe this? No. No. Bobby, I'm afraid not. Oh, okay. Do you all believe this? Not if you can hear me. Okay, yeah, all right. All right, so, but this, to a materialist, big X, none of these things happened, okay? It's all a make-believe, fairy tale narrative. What really happened is once there was nothing, and then suddenly everything. And then everything began to change, and everything became amino acids. And then the amino acids taught themselves how to combine together. And then they created chains of information somehow out of chemistry and began, anyway. So they have a narrative which is utterly, incomprehensibly impossible. It's not just even a matter of mathematics. It's simply you don't get there. There's no, which is why I was watching yesterday the latest installment of the Aliens series, which I wouldn't recommend that much because it's really just a copy of the first one, but with updates. But in the last one, Ridley Scott, before here and then before that, in the last three, he's given away his belief in something called panspermia, which is the idea that human life came from aliens. Okay, aliens came down here and seeded the waters with their DNA, and that's where we came from. Here's the problem: you've only moved it back to the, because it begs the question. What's the question it begs? Where did the aliens come from? And then they say, other aliens, and then you're like, it's aliens all the way down. It's like the old question is, what's supporting the world? There's this giant turtle. What supports the giant turtle upon whose back the world is? Other turtles. And what supports that turtles? And then you say it's turtles all the way down. It's just an infinite regression of turtles, infinite regression of aliens. Yeah, so let's move on. All right, so what happens to a person at death? This should be one of the most important questions that people deal with. But so many people, they examine this less than what should I eat tonight for dinner? Okay, it has less importance to them. Or what socks should I wear? There are literally people who advance to death without ever having thought about what's on the other side. Until they get to the precipice, and then terror is usually the result, unfortunately. Liz, can you read this? Okay, thank you.
What happens to a person at death? For each person, death is either the gate to life with God and his people, or the gate to eternal separation from the only thing that will ultimately fulfill human aspirations.
So we deal with either, at death, we either deal with an eternity in heaven or an eternity in hell. Remember this, you all have the divine spark. You all are eternal creatures. And you will all enter into eternity. And an eternity that is either glorious or more terrible than you can ever conceive of. And you will eventually be given your material body back, regardless of whether you were destined for heaven or hell. The interesting thing is the picture of eternal corruption that is pointed out by Christ. And what's that phrase he uses that talks about the weeping and gnashing of teeth, but also where the worm does not die. Okay, the idea of always corrupting, but never breaking down eternally. It's an awful, awful scenario. So you're physically, you take on the corruption that was part of your soul. Why is it possible to know anything at all? Next question. Okay, how do we get information? Information has to come to us via revelation, especially if it's about people, right? So there's two different kinds of ways that we can get, within the Christian worldview, information, right? Both of them are very important. What's the first one? General revelation. We report to general revelation, and he tells us about, what happens is we examine the world around us. Romans 1:18 tells us that the world tells us there's a God. The very fact that it has order to it, the very fact that it's meant to sustain us, the very fact that it rains and things grow, all of these tell us that we have a creator and that he is good and worthy of our worship and so on. But then it goes on to say we deny those things and we worship the creation instead of the creator. That happens all the time. Jane, could you read the human beings thing there?
Human beings can know both the world around them and God himself, because God has built into them the capacity to do so, and because he takes an active role in communicating.
So he communicates his existence to us in general revelation, and then he communicates his will to us in special revelation. Okay, that's mediated to us through prophets, through things like dreams, and then finally, what was the greatest mediation of God's special revelation to us? His Son, Jesus. Okay, the Word incarnate. All right, I'm going to say we're going to leave it there because it's already 7:34, and we need to go ahead and pray. We can take this up. We've only got 3 sections to do after this.